I recently caught a glimpse of a map being used in a logistics hub in Xi'an, and it really didn't look like any map I'd seen in a traditional textbook.
Right.
You know, we usually think of global power as something that floats carrier groups patrolling the Pacific or, tankers squeeze through the Malacca Strait.
The maritime choke points.
Exactly. We're always taught that whoever controls the sea controls the world. But looking at these thick, dark lines stretching westward into the vast, silent heart of Eurasia, you just realize the game has shifted. It's moved from the water to the soil.
And that's the pivot we're diving into today. It's a fundamental change in how we should be thinking about global strategy.
It really is. And what caught my eye wasn't just the trade volume, though the numbers are, they're staggering. We're about to cross the $100 billion mark for the first time.
An incredible milestone.
But it was the language,
Yeah.
the specific heavy language used in the newest legal documents. It wasn't partnership or cooperation, the kind of fleeting words we hear all the time in diplomacy.
Well, this was different.
It was permanent, a permanent treaty of good neighborliness. I mean, think about that for a second.
It's very deliberate choice of words.
In a world where alliances last as long as the next election cycle, these 6 nations just put a forever stamp on their borders. It feels, almost archaic, like something from a 19th century empire building manual.
But it's aimed squarely at modern fears, the asymmetric threat.
At first glance, you think, okay, it's a trade upgrade, it's about securing energy, but then you dig into the clauses on defense collaboration, on territorial sovereignty, and a much more calculated picture emerges. While the world is distracted by friction on the coastlines, a massive, legally binding land barrier is being bolted into place.
And that raises the core questions, right? Why would 5 nations, all with their own complex histories with Russia and the West, agree to a permanent legal embrace with China?
And the big one,
Yeah.
what happens to global strategy when the world's biggest factory finally figures out how to thrive without needing the ocean at all?
That question, what happens when the ocean becomes optional, is exactly why this deep dive is so critical. We are watching the geopolitical center of gravity shift, pivoting away from those traditional sea lanes and towards a land-based, consolidated, and as you said, legally entrenched Eurasian core.
So let's start with the numbers. Because the sheer speed and scale of the economic shift, that really provides the foundation for everything else that follows.
It's the engine driving the entire process.
The pace of integration here is just astounding. Since that first China-Central Asia Summit in 2023, the trade relationship has, it's accelerated beyond all expectations.
It really is.
We're talking about a trade volume between China and the 5 Central Asian countries hitting a historic high of nearly $100 billion. The specific figure for 2024 is $94.8 billion.
And to put that in context for you, that's a staggering 35% growth in bilateral trade over just 2 years.
35%.
When an economic relationship of this size grows by over a third in such a short time, it's not just more business. It signifies a profound reorientation of the entire region's economic gravity.
So China has really cemented its position.
Oh, absolutely. It's now Central Asia's undisputed top trade partner and the region's main source of foreign direct investment. There's no ambiguity there anymore.
And if we look a little closer at the composition of that trade, you can see where the leverage is. China's exports to the region were $64.2 billion in 2024.
Which means 2/3 of the total trade is flowing from China into Central Asia.
That's a powerful lever of influence, isn't it?
It's an unmistakable structural dependency. For these nations, their consumer markets, their industrial inputs, and more, their infrastructure tech. It's all sourced primarily from Beijing.
So their economies are now deeply invested in China's stability and success.
Of course, when your main market, your chief supplier, and your source of capital are all the same country, your foreign policy priorities will naturally align to protect that. It's just rational economics driving geopolitical alignment.
And we often talk about these huge numbers in the abstract, but the real story is what it means on the ground. The efficiency gains from these massive logistics shifts.
Absolutely. You can see this in a story like that of the logistics merchant, Bakhtiyor, in Tashkent, in Uzbekistan.
Right.
For years, his business was held back by old Soviet-era infrastructure, customs bottlenecks, all the usual problems.
The promise of the Belt and Road Initiative was supposed to fix that.
And now, as the trade volume pushes toward that $100 billion mark, he calls the long freight trains the Iron Camel caravans. His story is so compelling because he's a direct beneficiary. We're talking about goods that once took a month on dusty roads, now arriving in days.
And what's the tangible result for a guy like Bakhtiyor?
His turnover has reportedly tripled. It's allowed him to expand, to invest in his community. This is how a macro strategy becomes a lived reality of stability and opportunity.
And this efficiency comes from, what, over 10,000 joint projects across the region?
That's right. All focused on streamlining customs, improving border infrastructure, standardizing logistics. The Iron Camel caravans are the physical proof of a deeply integrated supply chain.
The funding approach here is also interesting. China isn't just relying on huge loans, which can create that classic debt trap narrative.
That's a crucial distinction. At the summit, President Xi announced a dedicated grant of $208 million.
A grant, not a loan.
Exactly. It's goodwill money, designed to translate that raw economic success directly into social capital.
So how effective is a targeted grant like that? Does it actually build sustainable political capital for Beijing?
It's highly effective. It bypasses the potential for debt distress and focuses on immediate local benefits. These funds go to things like poverty reduction centers, educational exchanges, programs for desertification prevention.
All very pressing regional needs.
And by doing that, China builds influence and strengthens its image as a reliable, non-coercive partner. It's soft power, but it's backed by very hard cash.
And this is where the future strategic intent gets really clear. The growth isn't just in traditional stuff like gas and textiles anymore. It's shifting hard into high-tech sectors. Let's talk about the data on Chinese-branded electric vehicles, EVs.
The stats on that are a clear marker of this shift. In 2023 alone, the export of Chinese-branded EVs to these 5 countries surged by a remarkable 608.5%.
600%.
That's over 51,000 vehicles entering these markets in a single year. This is profoundly significant.
A 600% jump in 1 year is it's massive. What does that signify beyond just car sales? Is Central Asia just becoming a consumer market for Chinese tech, or is it deeper?
Oh, it's much deeper. It signifies deep industrial and technological leadership. First, Chinese industrial standards are being embedded into daily life and infrastructure. Second, the rapid adoption of EVs creates an immediate and long-term reliance on Chinese supply chains for parts, charging, batteries.
It locks the region into Chinese standards.
They're a rapidly growing, high-value sector, yes. And the cooperation goes beyond cars. They're expanding partnerships in smart agriculture, water-saving tech, green minerals, clean energy, and AI.
They're moving from just being a major resource buyer to being a full-spectrum development partner.
That's confirmed by the Astana Declaration. It specifically commits them to cooperation in emerging fields. It's a mutually reinforcing structure. The Central Asian states get modern tech to modernize their economies.
And China secures long-term access to critical resources like green minerals and rare earths that it needs for its own high-tech ambitions.
Exactly. It anchors their shared future not in the old economy of oil and cotton, but in the most competitive, forward-looking sectors of the global economy.
So the economic framework is built, the money is flowing, the tech standards are being set. This is the perfect segue to the steel cable holding it all together, the legal framework that defines the term of engagement as forever.
This legal framework is really the anchor of the whole story. We're talking about the Treaty on Eternal Good Neighborliness, Friendship and Cooperation, signed in Astana in June 2025.
That 15-article document, the terminology is what's so striking: permanent or eternal.
The choice of permanent demands attention. In diplomacy, language is calibrated to signal strategic intent. Historically, China has reserved treaties signaling the highest levels of strategic coordination for who? Russia and Pakistan.
Right, and even then they use terms like friendship for generations to come.
Exactly. This new treaty is a big deal because it's the first time Beijing has signed such a high-level, permanent treaty on a multilateral basis. It involves all 5 Central Asian states.
It's a pioneering initiative, as President Xi described it. It takes these, fleeting political commitments and turns them into a long-term legal reality. It creates geopolitical inertia.
Inertia that survives presidential terms and changes in political climates.
So why is that word permanent so important here compared to typical alliance language?
Well, traditional alliances like NATO rely on ongoing, often renegotiated defense agreements. They're subject to political will. This treaty uses a softer concept, eternal good neighborliness, but embeds it with the hardest possible legal prohibitions.
It's designed to institutionalize stability without looking like a formal military pact.
Precisely. By making it permanent, they are legally minimizing the risk of shifting loyalties or external pressures that might cause one of these states to pivot west or challenge China's core interests down the line. Future governments in all 6 countries are legally compelled to stick to this core alignment.
And the most powerful part of that alignment, the part that really moves this from commerce to hard security, is the non-interference mandate in Article 3.
Article 3 is the strategic core. Respecting sovereignty is standard, but the article adds this critical, broad prohibition. It mandates that all parties must take measures to prohibit any activities within their territories that violate the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the other parties.
That is a tremendously powerful legal tool.
It is.
It effectively obliges Central Asian governments to actively police and stop any dissident groups, NGOs, or media on their soil that might be seen as working against China's core interests, for instance, regarding Xinjiang.
That is the direct interpretation. It legally seals China's western border against political instability. And the second part of Article 3 is just as strategic. It says that parties will not participate in any alliance or group directed against other parties, nor support hostile actions.
That clause seems aimed squarely at external powers, trying to stop them from building any kind of anti-Beijing coalition in Central Asia.
Precisely. It institutionalizes high strategic coordination. It secures China's northwestern doorstep by legally barring any Central Asian state from hosting or joining a coalition targeting China. Beijing doesn't need to overtly demand allegiance. The legal framework mandates it.
While securing the geopolitical flank is paramount, the economic necessity here is equally vital, especially for energy security. This permanence is a critical hedge for China.
The quiet permanence the treaty provides for physical infrastructure is China's deep hedge against global volatility. Beijing is actively de-risking its energy supply by establishing these secure land-based routes. It insulates its economy from instability in places like West Asia or the South China Sea.
And Central Asia is an absolutely vital energy artery for that strategy.
Immensely critical. I mean, look at Turkmenistan. It's China's largest natural gas supplier. China now accounts for over 80% of Uzbek gas exports. The scale of the infrastructure, both current and planned, is just breathtaking.
Like Line D of the China-Central Asia gas pipeline.
Yes, designed to deliver up to 85 billion cubic meters of natural gas annually. This physical infrastructure, now backed by a perpetual legal commitment, dramatically strengthens Beijing's long-term economic and energy security.
And we hear about the people maintaining this massive infrastructure, the individuals whose lives are now tied up in this promise of cooperation.
Right. Think of someone like Sarek, a pipeline technician in Kazakhstan's Mangistau region. He works on a section of this pipeline. His job is to ensure the steady flow of energy across thousands of kilometers.
A job that used to feel pretty vulnerable to geopolitical shifts, I'd imagine.
Exactly. But with the treaty, he talks about a sense of quiet permanence. He's not worried about foreign policy. He's focused on technical reliability, and he knows the political weight of 6 nations is behind the integrity of that pipeline.
So the land-based energy corridor becomes a lifeline of human cooperation.
Anchored by a legal promise. And that stability contrasts sharply with energy diplomacy that relies on short-term contracts. This is about securing resource supply for the next 50 to 100 years.
Kazakhstan, in particular, seems very comfortable with this deep, long-term integration.
Kazakhstan is central to the whole system. And President Tokayev has been very public in saying that China sets no political conditions.
Which is a powerful diplomatic signal to other global powers.
It's a very appealing message for sovereign states, wary of external political pressure. It frames the engagement as being based strictly on mutual economic benefit.
And yet they're still moving into incredibly sensitive sectors, far beyond just oil and gas. I mean, nuclear cooperation that signals an extremely high-stakes partnership.
It's the ultimate expression of trust and long-term planning. Kazakhstan holds 20% of the world's uranium reserves, making it indispensable for China's domestic nuclear power expansion.
And Tokayev has said they're considering China's National Nuclear Corporation, CNNC, to build their new power plants.
He has. So China is securing both the physical energy supply through pipelines and a long-term strategic resource supply for its advanced energy future. The partnership covers the entire nuclear cycle.
It's comprehensive strategic alignment.
Spanning all forms of energy. The treaty isn't just an agreement. It's the legal and physical foundation for a new Eurasian order, built on shared interests and insulated from external disruption.
So if the permanent treaty is the legal anchor, then institutionalization is the superstructure that makes sure this new order actually functions. China isn't just relying on bilateral deals or existing forums.
No, it's a dense and sophisticated web. You have platforms that operate simultaneously and reinforce each other. The China-Central Asia Secretariat, set up in 2024, is key. It formalizes coordination at the administrative level.
And that operates alongside existing frameworks like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO.
Exactly. The SCO handles the broader security issues, and everything is under the massive umbrella of the Belt and Road Initiative. The Secretariat is like a dedicated, permanent working group for these 6 nations, making sure momentum isn't lost between big summits.
So it maintains policy continuity.
That's its primary function.
Yeah.
But beyond these macro platforms, Beijing is also deploying these highly specific, issue-based cooperation mechanisms.
Like the areas tied to that $208 million grant we mentioned.
Precisely. This leads to specialized centers for poverty reduction, educational exchange hubs, platforms for desertification prevention, and so on. This dense engagement ensures China's presence is felt across all policy sectors, making the Chinese system indispensable for solving local challenges.
And this intense institutional push ties directly back to what is clearly China's main, long-standing security concern in the region, the stability of its neighborhood.
The security imperative is absolutely central. It's all about guaranteeing the stability of its 3,300-kilometer shared border with Xinjiang province.
Economic prosperity is the long-term guarantee, but proactive security cooperation is the immediate need.
And the legal documents are very specific about the threats they're jointly committed to fighting. China's central concern is combating the 3 forces: terrorism, separatism, and religious extremism.
The treaty in Article 7 mandates cooperation on this.
It does, but they also expand that to transnational organized crime, drug smuggling, and cybercrime. The strategic goal is unequivocal: zero spillover of instability, especially of an extremist or separatist kind, into Xinjiang.
And they're building physical infrastructure for this security cooperation, too.
That's the practical application of the treaty. The 6 nations agreed to form an SKO anti-terrorist center in Bishkek, the capital of Kyrgyzstan. This confirms a robust commitment to comprehensive security cooperation, including defense industry collaboration. They're integrating their internal security apparatuses.
To really understand why this strategy is unfolding this way, we have to look inward at China's own domestic development priorities, specifically the Go West campaign.
The Go West campaign is foundational to all of this. It was launched back in late 1999 to fix a huge historical economic imbalance. For 2 decades, reforms and foreign investment had overwhelmingly focused on the coastal provinces.
So the East got rich while the West stayed poor.
Massively so. The interior West was underdeveloped, receiving only about 5% of China's total FDI in that period. This created immense geographic disparity, which is a recipe for internal friction.
Especially in regions with large ethnic minority populations like Xinjiang and Tibet.
Precisely. So the official goal was monumental: redirect huge amounts of government spending and FDI westward. The plan was to build infrastructure, tap the vast natural resources, and it's worth noting 50% of China's mineral resources are in the West, and raise living standards for the 285 million people there.
So officially, it's a massive domestic poverty reduction and stability program. But there's a strong critical analysis suggesting this was always deeply strategic, not just social uplift.
And this is where the critical analysis comes in, which really started back in the early 2000s. Critics suggest the campaign was, by design, an excuse for strategic resource exploitation and political control, just thinly veiled as a poverty reduction effort.
And they pointed to what, specifically?
They pointed to the sheer volume of massive pipeline projects, like the Tibetan Pipeline Project and the gigantic Xinjiang-Shanghai Pipeline, running from the Tarim Basin all the way to the coast.
Pipelines designed to move resources out of the region to fuel the developed Eastern industrial centers.
That's the core of the criticism. Xinjiang alone has immense reserves, something like 10.7 billion tons of crude oil and 8.4 trillion cubic meters of natural gas. For critics, the rapid construction of these pipelines showed the primary focus was energy extraction, not creating sustainable local economies in the West.
And beyond resource extraction, critics also argued the infrastructure was explicitly linked to political control.
Absolutely. The massive development railways, highways, airports was seen as having a dual purpose: facilitate resource extraction, but also make it much easier to move ethnic Chinese, the Han, as well as troops and military equipment into and throughout the region.
Which feeds directly into concerns about cultural expansionism or Sinification.
And the demographic numbers really underscore this transformation. Before 1949, the Uyghur population was about 93% of the residents in Xinjiang.
And today?
Today, ethnic Chinese, the Han, make up around 41% of Xinjiang's total population. Critics argue the Go West campaign actively encouraged Han migration, weakening unique ethnic minority cultures and strengthening Beijing's long-term administrative control.
So it's essential to see this current push into Central Asia with this permanent treaty as the external geopolitical extension of that Go West strategy.
That framing is precisely correct. Geopolitically, China is filling a very clear regional vacuum. Russia's capacity in the region has been strained post-Ukraine. The U.S. has been, let's say, less consistent in its engagement. Beijing has capitalized on that space with overwhelming consistency and capital.
So they're not just building a regional order, they're modeling a different style of global leadership.
That's the diplomatic implication. Beijing is packaging this entire regional order within its broader global frameworks, like the Community of Shared Future for Mankind and the Global Security Initiative. By doing this, they project China as a stable, predictable global leader, an alternative to what they often frame as the unpredictable or coercive models of the U.S. and its allies.
The message is clear. Our engagement offers permanence and stability without political demands.
So we've covered the strategic motives and the legal foundation. Now let's get to the physical manifestation of this permanence. The massive infrastructure projects physically bolting these six nations together.
And the cornerstone has to be the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan Railway, the CKU.
The CKU is highly strategic. It's designed to fundamentally re-engineer continental trade flows. It completely bypasses Russia, creating a new rail link from China to Central Asia and onward toward West Asia and Europe. It's a key, transformative part of the Belt and Road Initiative.
And the scale and engineering complexity are just immense. It's crossing some of the most difficult high-altitude terrain on Earth.
It is a staggering undertaking. The total cost is estimated at $4.7 billion. But the financing is just as revealing. China is providing about $2.3 billion of that as a 35-year loan. And crucially, China holds a 51% controlling stake in the joint company.
With Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan each owning 24.5%.
Right. Holding that controlling stake ensures China dictates the management and long-term strategy no matter who is in power in the partner nations. It secures their investment.
And the terrain itself?
It's brutal. Nearly 40% of the route in Kyrgyzstan involves complex engineering, 50 bridges, 29 tunnels. This project is a deliberate physical effort to overcome the geographic constraints of Central Asia and turn it from a landlocked region into a continental nexus.
To really connect China to Europe by land, though, the logistical role of Kazakhstan remains unparalleled. It's the undeniable transit hub.
It's irreplaceable. Kazakhstan accounts for an astounding 85% of all land transport from China heading to Europe. Its stability and infrastructure are vital to Beijing's entire Eurasian strategy.
And the cargo volume is still growing.
It increased by 12% to 211,000 containers in 2024. And almost all of that goes through Kazakhstan. It is the primary artery for this strategic pivot away from the sea.
And Kazakhstan is actively pushing for even more connectivity to integrate this system with other global routes.
Yes, they're not just content to be a transit route. They're actively advocating to connect the BRI with the Trans-Caspian International Transport Route, the TITR, or Middle Corridor. They're modernizing their Caspian seaports and have even proposed a joint cargo terminal with China at the port of Kurik.
They're positioning themselves as an indispensable logistics platform.
Linking east and west not just by rail, but across the Caspian Sea, further insulating the whole system from geopolitical disruption.
But ultimately, this grand vision of security and prosperity driven by infrastructure, it has to resonate with the people who live there, right? The geopolitical vision has to translate into tangible, daily opportunity.
That human perspective is the final metric of success. Consider someone like Egil, a young engineering student from the Fergana Valley.
An area that has historically been a nexus of both trade and, well, instability.
Exactly. But she's witnessed the transformation firsthand, the new tunnels and bridges turning a treacherous, multi-day journey into a few hours of smooth transit.
She really embodies that generational shift in perception.
She does. She reportedly said her grandfather used to fear the shadows in the mountains, a reference to past isolation and security threats. But she sees only career opportunities.
Right.
Her insight is profound. She views security not as a wall to keep people out, but as a well-paved road that allows safe transit and economic opportunity.
It's the tangible lived peace provided by deep infrastructure integration.
And if comprehensive security means a young woman can travel safely and build a career in a once isolated valley, then regional prosperity becomes more than a strategic goal. It becomes a self-enforcing reality.
So that structural integration, physical, economic, and legal, is designed to achieve long-term stability and reduce the geographic constraints that have historically crippled the landlocked Central Asian states.
By embedding them in a continental trade network anchored by permanent legal commitment, China helps move these nations toward deep economic integration with major world economies. The goal is to make the landlocked region land-linked, creating prosperity that acts as its own buffer against instability.
And the legal and strategic commitments become self-enforcing when people like Bakhtiyor, Sarek, and Agil see the direct benefits.
The massive Eurasian land barrier isn't just bolted together by steel rails and pipeline welds, but by mutual economic dependency and a shared vision of a predictable, prosperous future.
This deep dive has revealed a remarkable transformation in global logistics and strategy. The six nations, China, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, have collectively engineered a massive, legally binding, and physically linked land barrier across Eurasia. This shift is not merely about increasing trade numbers, though crossing the $100 billion milestone is certainly a powerful benchmark.
It's about institutionalizing strategic coordination and resource security with the stamp of forever. It represents a successful effort to reorient global supply chains and geopolitical focus away from volatile maritime choke points and into the quiet, stable heart of the continent. The new rule of the road is permanence, built on shared infrastructure and legal commitment.